For months before my surgery, Merrick kept telling me everything would be okay. Every time I worried about the recovery, he would hold my hand and say, "I'll be right here. You won't have to go through any of it alone." Those words gave me comfort because I had never gone through a major operation before. I trusted my husband more than anyone else. The doctors explained that the first week after surgery would be the hardest. I wouldn't be allowed to lift anything, bend too much, or move around without being careful. They also said I should have someone with me at home to help with simple things like preparing meals, getting my medication, and making sure I didn't fall. Merrick sat beside me during every appointment and agreed to everything the doctors recommended. He even took time off from work so he could stay with me. Before the operation, he packed the kitchen with groceries, cleaned the house, and told me not to worry about anything except getting better. Seeing him do all those things made me believe our marriage was stronger than ever. Even my parents said I was lucky to have such a supportive husband. Looking back now, I realize I was paying attention to the promises instead of the small warning signs. Corinne always expected Merrick to drop everything whenever she wanted him. If she called during dinner, he answered. If she needed help with something that could easily wait, he left immediately. I noticed it, but I kept telling myself it wasn't a big problem because, in the end, he always came home to me. At least, that's what I believed before everything changed. When I came home from the hospital, every movement hurt. Getting out of bed took several minutes, and even walking across the room made me tired. I followed the doctor's instructions carefully because I didn't want to slow down my recovery. I expected Merrick to stay close, especially during those first difficult days. On the second morning, he walked into the bedroom looking uncomfortable. He stood there quietly for a moment before telling me that his mother had reminded him about a hiking trip she had planned a long time ago. He said she had been looking forward to it for months and would be deeply disappointed if he cancelled. I stared at him, thinking he had to be joking. I asked if he was really talking about leaving while I still needed help getting to the bathroom. Instead of answering right away, he said it was only one weekend and that I was stronger than I thought. He told me there was food in the refrigerator, my medicine was on the kitchen counter, and I could call him if something important happened. I reminded him that the doctor had clearly said I shouldn't be alone yet. He shrugged and said plenty of people recover without someone watching them every minute. His calm voice hurt more than if he had yelled at me. It felt like he had already decided, and my opinion didn't matter. Later that afternoon, I overheard him talking to Corinne on the phone. She sounded cheerful while making plans for the trip. Before hanging up, she told him not to feel guilty because I would recover soon. But special moments with family could never be replaced. Merrick didn't argue with her. He simply agreed. The next day, the phone seemed to ring every few hours. Most of the calls were from Corinne. I could hear her voice from the other side of the room even when Merrick wasn't using the speaker. At first, she asked how I was feeling, but the conversation always turned into something else. She started making little comments that sounded polite on the surface but felt hurtful. She said I needed to be more independent and stop expecting everyone to take care of me. She acted as if recovering from surgery was nothing more than a small inconvenience. Every time Merrick listened without correcting her, I felt a little more alone. When I tried to explain how much pain I was in, Merrick told me I was focusing too much on the negative. He reminded me that the surgery had gone well and said I should be grateful instead of worrying so much. Those words didn't comfort me. They made me feel like my struggles didn't matter. One evening, I told him I was scared about being left alone before I was fully healed. Instead of reassuring me, he sighed and said his mother thought I depended on him too much. Hearing him repeat her opinion shocked me. These weren't his own words before. Now they sounded exactly like something Corinne would say. After that, I stopped sharing every fear that came into my mind. Whenever I spoke honestly, I felt like I was being judged instead of understood. The house became quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. I spent more time staring out the window than talking to my husband. My body was slowly healing, yet my heart felt heavier with each passing day. The morning Merrick was supposed to leave, I barely slept. Every time I woke up, I hoped he had changed his mind. Instead, I heard him moving around the kitchen, finishing the last few things before he left. He checked the refrigerator, placed bottled water on the counter, and made sure my pills were easy to reach. It looked thoughtful, but none of it replaced having someone there if something went wrong. Before walking out the door, he came into the bedroom with his backpack already on. He leaned down, kissed my forehead, and told me to rest. Then he said he would be back before I knew it. I watched him leave through the front window, carrying his hiking gear while I struggled just to sit up without pain. A few moments later, I heard his truck drive away. The house became completely silent. Around lunchtime, it was time to take my medicine. I slowly stood up and tried to walk toward the kitchen. Halfway there, a sharp pain hit my stomach, and I became dizzy. I grabbed the edge of a chair to keep myself from falling, but my legs felt too weak to hold me up. I realized I couldn't do this alone. With shaking hands, I called my elderly neighbor, Bryn. She arrived within minutes and found me sitting on the floor, trying to catch my breath. She helped me back into bed and brought me my medication and water. After seeing how difficult everything was for me, she looked around the empty house and asked where Merrick was. When I quietly told her he had gone hiking with his mother, she stared at me in complete disbelief. For the first time, I admitted out loud that my marriage wasn't the happy one everyone thought it was. The next morning, Bryn came back to check on me. She brought homemade soup and offered to help with a few things around the house. I was grateful because even simple tasks still took all my energy. While looking for my insurance papers so I could keep track of my medical bills, I asked her to hand me a folder from the desk. As we sorted through the papers, Bryn noticed that some bank statements had been mixed in with the insurance documents. I almost put them aside, but one page caught my attention. The balance in our joint savings account was much lower than I remembered. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. I kept reading and found records showing that a large amount of money had been transferred into a different account. The account only had Merrick's name on it. The transfer had happened just a few days after my surgery was scheduled. He had never mentioned opening another account or moving our savings. Trying to understand what was happening, I looked through another envelope. Inside were receipts for hotel reservations, outdoor equipment, and deposits for future family vacations. Most of them listed Corinne as the person making the plans. There were also handwritten notes about keeping travel expenses separate from household costs. The hardest thing to read was a note beside one of the receipts. It said my medical expenses should come from my own money because they were personal. I sat there in silence, reading those words again and again. Suddenly, the hiking trip didn't seem like one bad decision. It felt like another piece of something that had been happening behind my back for a long time. Late that afternoon, I heard Merrick's truck pull into the driveway. He came inside carrying his backpack and talking about the hiking trails as if he had returned from a normal weekend. The smile on his face disappeared when he noticed Bryn's soup containers on the kitchen counter and realized someone had been helping me while he was gone. Instead of asking how I was feeling, he wanted to know why the neighbors knew he had left me alone. He said people had been looking at him differently when he got home. I couldn't believe that his biggest concern was what others thought instead of what I had gone through. Before I could answer, Corinne walked through the front door without knocking. She looked around the house and immediately started criticizing me. She said asking neighbors for help made the family look irresponsible. According to her, private problems should stay inside the family, even though she had encouraged Merrick to leave in the first place. I finally stood up for myself and asked why she believed a hiking trip was more important than my recovery. She rolled her eyes and said I was making everything into a bigger issue than it needed to be. Merrick rubbed his face and looked completely frustrated. Then he admitted something I never expected to hear. He said he was tired of being caught between me and his mother. After a long silence, he quietly added that he usually chose his mother because it was easier than dealing with conflict at home. His words hit harder than anything else had. In that moment, I understood that this wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was a choice he had been making for years. The man I believed would always put our marriage first had finally admitted that I had never truly come first at all. I didn't raise my voice after hearing his confession. There was nothing left to argue about. The truth was finally clear, and no amount of talking could change it. From that day on, I decided to spend my energy on healing instead of trying to convince my husband to care about me. A few days later, while Merrick was at work, I scheduled a meeting with a family law attorney. I took copies of the bank statements, insurance papers, and every document I had found. The attorney listened carefully and told me to keep records of everything from that point forward. She explained that clear evidence would matter much more than emotional arguments. I also asked Bryn if she would be willing to write down what she saw the day she found me alone after my surgery. She agreed without hesitation. My doctor provided copies of my medical records showing the recovery instructions I had been given before leaving the hospital. I placed every paper into a folder and kept it in a safe place. As the weeks passed, I continued physical therapy. Every session made me a little stronger. I could walk farther without pain, prepare my own meals again, and slowly return to normal daily life. With each small improvement, I felt more confident about my future. At home, I stayed calm and polite. I stopped asking Merrick where he had been or why he made certain choices. He seemed relieved that our arguments had ended. I could tell he believed everything was finally getting back to normal. What he didn't realize was that my silence wasn't forgiveness. I wasn't forgetting what had happened. I was preparing for the next chapter of my life, and this time I was making sure I would never be left unprotected again. By the time my doctor cleared me from physical therapy, I felt stronger than I had in months. I could finally move through my day without constant pain, and that strength gave me the courage to take the next step. I met with my attorney again and told her I was ready to separate my finances from Merrick's completely. She helped me open my own account and legally protect the money that belonged to me. As we reviewed more records, we uncovered spending I had never known about. Merrick had used money from our joint account for expensive equipment, hotel reservations, and several trips planned by Corinne. Some of those payments had been made after we had agreed to save for my medical recovery. The attorney carefully organized every document and filed the necessary paperwork before Merrick had any idea what was happening. She told me not to confront him yet. Instead, she wanted everything prepared properly so he couldn't move money or hide information once he learned the truth. Corinne soon noticed that I was no longer discussing household finances with her. She began making comments about how a wife should trust her husband and stop acting suspicious. When I refused to answer, she became more aggressive and started sending letters about family expenses and vacation plans. My attorney smiled when she read them because those letters proved Corinne had been involved in decisions that should have belonged only to Merrick and me. For years, Merrick and Corinne had acted as if they controlled every part of my life. They assumed I would always stay quiet and accept whatever they decided. But now the situation had changed. For the first time, they were the ones who didn't know what was coming next, and I was finally the one holding all the evidence. The day of mediation finally arrived. I walked into the meeting feeling nervous, but I also felt prepared. My attorney had organized every document in order, making it easy to show exactly what had happened. This wasn't about telling emotional stories anymore. It was about facts that could not be denied. The first documents presented were my medical records. They clearly stated that I should not have been left alone during the early days of my recovery. The doctor's instructions matched everything I had been saying from the beginning. Merrick could no longer claim that he believed I would be fine by myself. Next came the financial records. Every transfer, receipt, and account statement showed where our money had gone. The timeline made it clear that important financial decisions had been made without my knowledge. There was no reasonable explanation for keeping those transactions hidden. Bryn also gave her statement about finding me alone after I nearly collapsed. She calmly described my condition and explained how frightened she had been when she realized no one was there to help me. Her words carried weight because she had nothing to gain by taking my side. She was simply telling the truth. Corinne tried to interrupt several times. She insisted I was being dramatic and claimed families should solve problems privately. But every time she spoke, another document or statement showed how deeply she had involved herself in our marriage. Instead of helping Merrick, her comments only made the pattern of interference more obvious. After hours of discussion, Merrick finally stopped arguing. He admitted that leaving me after surgery had been his decision. No one had forced him to walk out that door. Hearing him accept responsibility didn't erase the pain, but it gave me something I had been waiting for since the day he left. At last, the truth was spoken out loud. Several months after the mediation, the divorce was finalized. Walking out of the courthouse, I didn't feel angry or bitter. I felt calm. For the first time in a long while, I knew my future belonged to me. I no longer had to wonder whether I would come second to someone else. I found a smaller home that was quiet and easy to manage. It wasn't fancy, but it felt peaceful. Every room reminded me that I had built a new beginning with my own strength. Bryn remained one of my closest friends, and I never forgot how she helped me when I needed someone the most. She proved that kindness can come from people who aren't even family. Without the stress of constant arguments, my health improved quickly. I returned to work, focused on the things I enjoyed, and slowly started smiling again. I realized how much energy I had spent trying to save a marriage that only one person was willing to protect. I later heard through mutual friends that Merrick's life hadn't turned out the way he expected. He continued putting his mother first, but it never brought him the happiness he thought it would. The marriage he once promised to protect was gone, and there was no way to undo the choices that caused it. Corinne finally had what she had always wanted. She had her son's full attention. But even that wasn't enough to fill the empty space left behind. The control she fought so hard to keep came at a price neither of them expected. Sometimes I think back to the morning Merrick walked out the door with his hiking backpack. For a long time, I believed that was the day everything fell apart. Now I understand it differently. It wasn't the end of my life. It was the moment I stopped waiting for someone else to choose me and finally chose myself.